The Liberal Party has met and we have determined that the new leader of our Liberal Party is Sussan Ley with 29 votes and Angus Taylor 25.
In relation to the Deputy Leader's position, we had two nominees, both Ted O'Brien and Phil Thompson. The result of that ballot was 38 to Ted O'Brien and 16 to Phil Thompson. So they will be our leadership team. Thank you.
Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Well, there you go. Confirmed as reported, Sussan Ley with a narrow full-vote win for the leadership over Angus Taylor, and Ted O'Brien with a much more comfortable win over Ted O'Brien, who stood on a whim, as Jane mentioned there. Sometimes that might be about trying to secure a front bench position under whoever emerges as leader, signalling some desire to go further. But no question there about Ted O'Brien winning a comfortable position, a majority there for the deputy's position. Now, what does Sussan Ley do from here, Jacob, in terms of trying to heal what is a clearly divided party between moderates and conservatives? This is, yes, there are some that go across the divide, but primarily this is a conservative-moderate divide, I think, that we've seen in this ballot, in this contest. How does Sussan Ley bridge that gulf? How does she bring the party together from here and begin a process of reviewing what went wrong, renewing, settling some of these policy conundrums and reconnecting with the voters who've been deserting the party?
So the Liberal Party's first female leader. It's a 81-year-old party. So I think up front, the historic moment that this is important to recognise.
Yep.
Very, very significant. She has an enormous task. She has been given the job really at one of the lowest ebbs of the Liberal Party in its history, if not the lowest ebb in terms of raw numbers in the Parliament. They hold about a third of all the seats across both chambers. An enormous rebuild required. And that's the coalition in all. An enormous rebuild required. There's a big job to do around the organisational structure, getting the right advice into the right rooms, rebuilding the party machinery, particularly in places like New South Wales and Victoria. And then really up front, David, is of course who she has as her own team. Ted O'Brien will be her deputy. That's a big step up for him in terms of pressure and how to deliver. But who she has as treasurer, who she has in some of these other big portfolios that matter, like defence, like immigration, the finance and treasury portfolios will be big questions.
And what does Angus Taylor do? Does he seek a treasury role again? Does he want to remain as shadow treasurer?
Well, I tell you what, if he doesn't, that's going to be a bad sign.
That's not a good look. Then he's sort of
at war
sitting
on the backbench,
fermenting. But it is definitely a sliding door moment that we're witnessing here. And I think the other final thought is she does have a lot of work to do with the coalition partner, and it's going to be interesting to see whether they can keep that movement together given those pressures.
She is a regional MP, so they do kind of have that in common. It's not like she's sort of doesn't understand the interests of the national parties. So.
Sometimes, however, the regional Liberals and the Nationals hate each other more than they're often in
contest with each other. We hate harder with
but look, it's a fair point. They should have more in common. And I think Sussan Ley would be relieved that David Littleproud won the Nationals leadership rather than Matt Cameron today. Then that's very secretive on the numbers. Not even David Littleproud, he said, knew the margin of his victory yesterday, but the fact he's won means sticking with net zero is somewhat more likely than it certainly would have been under Matt Canavan, who wants to move away from that target altogether. But yes, for Sussan Ley, there's that first task of putting together a front bench that can deliver some unity, and presumably she's talking to the party room right now, because we haven't seen anyone emerge from the party room. The results they know, and presumably right now they're hearing from their newly elected leader, as we will later today in a press conference. But then I don't think they can delay some of these policy decisions too long. Some of the big ones, nuclear and net zero being chief amongst them.
It's quite extraordinary how quickly some of these changes happen. There's a WhatsApp account that the leader of the opposition's office uses to notify journalists in the press gallery of press conferences and travel. It was a very active account during the campaign, as you'd imagine, but already the names are changing in that account in terms of staff. I won't go through the names, but when it changes fast.
It does. It's now called the LOTO, Leader of the Opposition Media and Press Gallery list. It'll be interesting. So I heard last night, speaking to a Liberal, that Sussan Ley had done the work as deputy. The deputy is meant to be the person who keeps a check on the party members, the backbench. And she'd done the work in checking in on them, keeping, being the kind of conduit between the backbench and the leader's office. And so perhaps this result is an endorsement of her approach in that respect. Maybe she's got that training now that she understands how vital it is, as John Howard would often talk about, to keep the broad church together.
One of the someone also has pointed out to me that she won that seat that she holds from Tim Fisher, and it was a three-cornered contest. So she's deeply familiar with the tensions in the coalition and how to manage them. So she might, from that point of view, she might actually be reasonably well placed to hold it together.
Speaking of those tensions, though, within the Liberal Party, what we've witnessed in this leadership contest, and it's been some years since we've had a leadership contest in the Liberal Party, the last being when Malcolm Turnbull was brought down and Scott Morrison emerged, because when Morrison lost the election, it was a pretty seamless transition to Peter Dutton, seen at the time as the only viable option. So now we have a leadership contest that has been quite bitter. In parts, the Taylor camp accusing Sussan Ley of campaigning for the leadership rather than campaigning for the election over recent months. The Sussan Ley camp blaming Angus Taylor for some of their economic failings and not laying a glove on Jim Chalmers and so on. So things did get quite willing over the past week.
I think there was some disappointment within the Liberal camp as well, that since the crushing defeat on Saturday, and I think it was Saturday a week ago, it's worth just remembering the numbers. The coalition now has gone backwards at 2 elections, and at the current sort of count, Labor will command more than a 50-seat majority over the coalition in the lower house. Like, it's actually staggering, the numbers, and those numbers could continue to increase, and there are a few seats in doubt, so those numbers might change. But since the election defeat, neither Sussan Ley nor Angus Taylor held a press conference or even sort of addressed colleagues.
Yeah, I was going to make this point earlier. I agree. I think it's been, normally, and yes, it's been some years, but normally with a leadership contest, you front the media, you explain why you want the job, what you want to do with it. Pretty simple stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that from either of them. They've released video messages, but not sort of fronted up to explain.
No, and also their role, right? This is a deputy leader and the shadow treasurer, both central to the Liberal Party, their policies, their strategy, very close to Peter Dutton, obviously. And Dutton, obviously lost his seat, so he's gone quiet. But no attempt to explain the loss.
Explain where they went wrong. Because any rebuild has to start, surely, with an acceptance and understanding of where things went wrong. And we've not yet heard from either of them.
What's coming up now will be a very important moment for her to address that. To suggest that she or indeed Angus had no role in that defeat would be disingenuous at best. And there was some criticism that neither of them, since the election defeat, publicly fronted up to, I guess, accept their role, their part in that defeat.
Doors have opened. Here comes Sussan Ley and Ted O'Brien, the leader and deputy leader of the Liberal Party, just elected into those roles. And a big smile from Sussan Ley. Let's have a listen in if she says anything here.
Thank you, everybody, and I will convene a press conference shortly where I will make further remarks. How do you feel being the first female leader of the Liberal Party, Susan?
Well, the leadership team tasked with rebuilding the Liberal Party and its electoral fortunes at a particularly low point, a record low defeat loss for the Liberal Party at the election just gone, and now they've been tasked with trying to steer the party back to a viable position from here. You can see some of the other Liberals, John O'Duniam and others, Andrew Hastie, emerging there. I don't think many will be all that surprised with the outcome on this ballot. There will be some, clearly, though, disappointed with the outcome. I think both of them will remain on the front bench, as will James Patterson, who just ducked around the back corner there. But Tony Passon, you can see at the doorway there, Angus Taylor's numbers man. He'd be disappointed with this outcome.
It was Linda Reynolds as well. Here they go.
Scott Buckholz.
I'll be interested to see where Andrew Hastie ends up. He's held the Shadow Defence portfolio. He is a future leadership aspirant, and we know from many years working in this building that you need to prove your competence in more sort of domestic focused or bigger portfolios. So it'll be interesting to see if he wants to move up, right? Yeah, to see if he moves into a portfolio outside of his known area of defence.
Yeah, it's a good point. James Patterson, it's understood, is keen for a move out of Home Affairs into either defence or foreign affairs, so maintaining a role in that sort of national security and global security space. So if he moves there, perhaps Andrew Hastie could go into Home Affairs, but you're right, to move into a more domestic focused or economic policy area would help in terms of any future leadership ambition he's got. But we know there'll be others like Tim Wilson itching for one of those economic portfolios. And where does Angus Taylor land here? Does he have any claim to continue as the Shadow Treasurer?
It's one of the fascinating questions, and it will also be one of her most difficult initial decisions.
Holly Hughes would be one of the happiest with this outcome.
Delighted with the result. Australia spoke very clearly to the Liberal Party. We've listened and we've acted, and we're united. Thank you.
Everyone happy with the result?
Absolutely.
Show of force, the Liberal women walking together there.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Linda Reynolds, fascinating character. So she is, well, her term will also be ending soon of her own volition. She wasn't pushed down the ballot or anything. But she gave a really interesting interview to ABC Perth where she said the seeds of this defeat were sown a long time ago. She's been a long-time advocate of getting more women into the party. And she was frustrated that multiple reports that she'd been involved in, plus the 2022 election defeat review, had basically been left on a shelf to gather dust. So I think for her today this would be seen as a good result.
No, I think that's right. And I think that collection of female senators, Liberal senators who came past the cameras there with a big smile on their face said a lot about how happy they are with the decision to opt for the first female Liberal leader and begin this process of modernising the party, as Sussan Ley has promised to do. What that looks like in terms of policy, we don't know yet. But that will be the job ahead for Sussan Ley and Ted O'Brien.
Incredibly tough challenge, incredibly tough. And of course there'll be some who'll be wondering whether, it's a dreadful phrase, I only heard it this morning for the first time, but whether she's been given the glass cliff. In a sense, there'll be a lot of people saying, well, the Liberal Party's finally picked the woman, but it's at its worst moment. Isn't that typical? Very unfair on her, personally, because she's here in this moment of time, and I'm sure she'll give it her best shot, but that will be one of the sort of subtexts that fly around, I suspect.
And I suppose also the fact that the Liberal Party is in such a depleted state that nobody really believes that whoever won today's ballot would actually be the opposition leader in 3 years' time, just because of that. So that's, I guess, her task, is to actually unite a party, but to do more than what Peter Dutton did. He kept the party together, but at the expense of any kind of policy development. So she's got to be trying to do both.
Now, we haven't yet seen, the reason we're just sitting on the Liberal corridor here is we haven't yet seen Angus Taylor emerge.
Or just Mr Price haven't seen, unless they maybe went the other way.
Is there another way out?
For the courtyard, get some fresh air.
Another way out.
We have them cornered.
Beam me up,
the
Scotty.
Existential question for the Liberal Party. Okay, but yeah, I would be interested to see them walk out. No doubt they're still in that room working out what this result means, where things went wrong.
The closeness of it tells you that there is no way this is the end of Angus Taylor.
Correct. A 4-vote margin with 3 senators due to go in a few months who we suspect voted for Sussan Ley means this is a very tight outcome indeed. But what's the strategy from here? Is it to get behind the new leader that the party's just endorsed, as Jason Wood, Dean Smith?
I mean, that's the message from James McGrath in the letter that you referenced earlier, where he said everyone needs to accept.
Great for Liberal Party first female leader.
Okay.
There you go. Great for the Liberal Party. First female leader, Andrew Bragg, who also would be very happy with this outcome.
Maybe those skills as a pilot in air traffic control are going to have to come in really handy for Sussan Ley, you'd have to say.
And what role will Andrew Bragg take as well? I think this will be interesting. If we're talking about modernising and reconnecting with urban Australians, they've lost a lot of MPs, lower house MPs in urban seats, but they still have the likes of, in the Senate, Andrew Bragg, Dave Sharma. Do you put them in more prominent roles?
You'd have to think yes, especially because they were such strong supporters of Sussan Ley from the beginning. I mean, even beyond rewarding your own backers, both have been very outspoken in the past week about the fact that the Liberal Party has basically been extinguished from the cities. And that is where Australia's population is centred. So at 2 elections now, you've had Liberal leaders say they're going to try and get the outer suburban and regional vote, and twice now that's failed. So that is telling the Liberal Party that they can't just ignore the cities and inner city areas on their path back to power.
And look, this decision itself to go with Sussan Ley and her pitch of a modern party reflecting modern Australia really is the pragmatic call of the party that they need to reconnect with those urban areas. They need to win back those seats in the big metropolitan centres of Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane. Without that, they have no chance of getting back into government. There may be reservations about Sussan Ley and her performance as deputy leader in the past and issues that have followed her through her career, but here they had a choice, a binary choice between the Conservative and the moderate, and they've opted for the moderate path. And I think that's the big outcome.
Yeah, it speaks very loudly. Here's some little facts about Sussan Ley that her office has helpfully sent all of us. She's actually been in Parliament for 24 years, a member for Farrer since 2001, so certainly a veteran of the Parliament.
David Fawcett, one of those
votes, the South Australian Senator. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
James Patterson.
What did he say?
How did you go, James? What do you reckon?
See you soon. Happy with the result? Speak soon.
Oh, interesting. Just speak soon.
Well.
Meanwhile, all those people have been sworn in that we've missed.
It's just one of those days where it's all happening at once. We will go back to Government House shortly, and we'll certainly see the group shot when they all assemble out on the steps in front. The new ministry of the second Albanese government after being sworn in. But I'm still very keen to see the
rival
candidate, Taylor, and Jacinta Price, who didn't end up putting a hand up. Just to recap that one, Jane. They released a video. She announced she would be running as deputy and explained the fight that she had, that she would bring to this role, and in the end, didn't put a hand up.
She didn't put a hand up. And I suspect your assessment is correct. Because of the process, there are no speeches. The leaders nominate first their candidacy, and then there's a vote. And so once Angus Taylor was knocked out of that and Sussan Ley prevailed, I suspect Jacinta Price thought, well, he was my ticket, so I'm not going to nominate now. But it is a really interesting...
Well, here's an interesting question. Had she stayed in the Nationals, she'd absolutely be on the front bench. The Nationals will now have, I think I saw an estimate, is it a quarter of the coalition party room now, or a quarter of the front bench positions because of the proportional change? She would absolutely be on the front bench, and there she is.
Yeah,
will she now be on the front bench at all? I suspect Sussan Ley will want to find some role for her. See what she says here.
Morning.
Is it worth a switch, Senator Price?
I'll be making comments in due course.
All right.
May or may not be ominous.
I've just
sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I've just heard from someone in the Conservative side who said the Jacinta ploy damaged Taylor and her. And this is a person who would ordinarily back Angus Taylor. So
I think that was certainly the case the last few days. That's what people were saying. It put a lot of noses out of joint.
Yeah.
And it might have actually hampered Taylor's case. I think the other thing too is it'll be interesting to see how she fares now, having done what she's done, Peter Dutton was really her great champion. He is gone. Angus Taylor didn't get up. We don't know where he lands, so she might be in for a tough time.
And this was the thing, Angus Taylor was seen by some as a continuation of the Peter Dutton approach, and bringing in Jacinta Price, as you say, someone who Peter Dutton championed so often and promoted, bringing her in as the deputy on his ticket, furthered that impression that this was a continuation of the Dutton era. Someone in the Sussan Ley camp said to me last night that it had been a godsend for the Ley camp, this idea that Jacinta Price would be running on the ticket with Angus Taylor. That really helped them.
And she was, during the campaign, seen as being able to just do what she liked in terms of policy announcements, whereas others were very, very controlled by Peter Dutton's office in terms of policy announcements and how they campaigned. So there's a bit of lingering resentment there.
And another Liberal type has actually just sent me this, which is really interesting. So obviously we know that in July the Senate composition changes because some senators who just voted are either retiring or they've lost their seat. So with Holly Hughes and Linda Reynolds leaving, they are both Ley votes. So the vote today, which was 29 to Ley, 25 to Taylor, on July 1 becomes 27 to Ley, 26 to Taylor. So it becomes even tighter.
You only need 1, 2, 3, 4 people to change their mind, and it becomes difficult. But I also recall, don't forget, Tony Abbott won leadership of the Liberal Party, I think by one vote. Went on to become, I don't think there's any question, one of the most effective opposition leaders ever, and then won a big election. So these tight votes don't necessarily
That's a very good point.
Mean that you're doomed in a sense. It can be turned around. Tony Abbott showed that.
Yeah.
All right,
this is Dan Tehan and Jane Hume emerging there. I suspect Zoe McKenzie. All people I'm sure we will see in prominent roles. I wonder if Dan Tehan is... let's see what he says here.
Almost like the third team that didn't run.
Wonderful.
Ben Small, back in Parliament.
I owe you about 17 calls.
Ben Small. So he's a West Australian Liberal senator who lost his spot, but he then recontested the lower house seat of Forest and won.
Looking forward to the challenge ahead of us. Absolutely.
You hear it for the Liberal Party?
Sorry?
You hear it in your direction?
Absolutely. We've got to demonstrate that the Liberal Party is listening to the people of Australia and learning. I'm very pleased to be a part of that, and it's time to rebuild and get on with it.
Just with your opinion, you talked about that, you're very pro-Israel. Some of Sussan Ley's detractors in the party are a bit concerned about some of her comments in the past, pro-Palestinian. Do you have any concerns about that, given your views?
Look, I've spoken with a number of members of the Jewish community about Susan. I've spoken with Susan about her views around Israel. I think Susan has seen the light on Israel in recent years, and I'm looking forward to working with her in the years ahead.
Can your party unite? It's pretty close in there. Can your party get on the same page and unite after this?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing the Australian people will not cop is a disunified opposition, and we need to now unite and rebuild. We can't rebuild if we're not united, and I think everybody in that room understands that, and that is exactly what we will do.
So you've got a new leader.
Is now the deputy. What message does that send to Queenslanders, particularly after the fortunes of your...
So I'm going to get you to start again, Nicole.
Yes, you've got a new deputy in your neighbour up the road. What message does that send to Queenslanders who sent your party a pretty strong message?
Yeah, look, Ted is one of the most capable of my colleagues. He's demonstrated his ability for sheer hard work. And Ted is a very intelligent man, an incredibly hard worker, and he will play a very, very important role in helping to rebuild the Liberal Party. That will be assumedly one of his principal jobs as the deputy leader of the Liberal Party, and I think he'll be an outstanding deputy leader.
Andrew, now that the leader vote,
hang on, guys, hang on.
Now that the vote is done and dusted, back to work, what do you think priority number one should be?
Well, from my perspective, priority number one will be listening to the people of Fisher. I took a bath from a primary vote perspective. I want to understand better why that came about and address it.
Is electing a woman for the first time as Liberal Party leader about sending a message to women as well? Is that what you actively tried to do?
Well, Sussan was the acting leader. She was the deputy leader.
As the leader?
She was the acting leader, the deputy leader for the last 3 years. Sussan is a woman with 24 years' experience in this place, and I think nothing beats experience in this place. You know where all the bodies are buried, you know the tactics, which is very important in this place. And Sussan, she's been here for 24 years. I think that speaks volumes.
Sending a message to women, given the Liberal Party has been leading the vote.
If you're asking me, was that the sole reason? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have to appoint people on merit. And the party room decided that Sussan was the best person to take us forward. For those seats that, like my own on the Sunshine Coast, that there was a very strong teal challenge. We need to understand better what was attracting people to vote for a teal. I'll be absolutely listening and digging around as to why that happened, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Sussan is an exceptional parliamentarian. I think she'll make a great leader.
James McGrath, on the extra pressure, can't help myself. Do you agree with James McGrath that the Liberal Party needs a commission to deal with these sort of deeper issues that the party faces?
Well, a commission has a legal connotation. I think we need to have a very, very detailed examination of what went wrong. I don't think we need a commission tends to suggest like a royal commission. We're not going to get a royal commission into the failures of the last campaign, but we do absolutely need a very, very detailed examination of what went wrong and how do we fix it. You had a crack already, so last question.
Ted O'Brien as deputy, would you anticipate keeping the nuclear policy?
Look, I think that we are going to need to assess all of the policies that we went to the last election with. That is a very, very important question that will ultimately be decided by the party room. It's just one of the many policies that we'll need to re-examine. Look, I'm on the record as having said that I support. Well, don't put words in my mouth. What I'm saying is I've supported nuclear because I believe that to take to the next election 82% renewables is going to disenfranchise Australians. We've got to look at it. We've got to be able to provide baseload, dispatchable, affordable power. And so what I'm saying to you, Nicole, is that all options should be on the table. I have supported nuclear in the past, but I do think that all options need to be on the table moving forward. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to head straight through here. Thank you. We welcome anybody to come into the party room. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Andrew Wallace stopping for a decent chat there as the rest of them file through, but acknowledging that on a few things, Sussan Ley's seen the light on Israel since her previous pro-Palestinian support years ago, and also suggesting that her long experience in Parliament, 24 years, is a real asset. She knows where all the bodies are buried. Was the line? Curious.
Slightly ominous, maybe?
Well, I think that's actually not an insignificant point that he kind of gets you thinking about. One of the things that Sussan Ley's pulled off here with this leadership contest is she's portrayed herself as the break from the past. That's been quite effective. It's obviously worked very narrowly in that party room, but remember, she was deputy leader the last 3 years. She was part of all the big decisions, all the big policy announcements that were made during the campaign. So it's going to be very important to get an accounting from her about her role in all of that. But for the purposes of this contest, she is the break from the past.
I'm just going to jump in there. We're going to continue our coverage on the news channel. Do stick with us. But for viewers on the ABC main channel, we will say farewell to you for now, and thank you for joining our coverage of these two big events unfolding in Canberra this morning. All right, so stay with us here on the news channel now as we continue to wait for Angus Taylor to emerge from the party room after his defeat in this leadership ballot, a narrow defeat. And we're going to see, there's the acting Whip Melisa Price we heard from earlier. And we're also still watching the swearing in at Government House in the corner of the screen there.
Look, as a party, it's important that we now unify behind Sussan. We have a big job to do. It's not just on the leader, it's us as a party to unify, make sure that we support her, put the right policies in place, and that comes about from listening. So there are a lot of lessons from this result as a party we need to take, and we have to do it as a collective. We have to work together to understand where we went wrong, why we were rejected by the Australian people, be humble, listen, learn and move forward as a collective. It's the only way we can survive.
In the end, there are only 2 votes in it. Is that stability?
We need to be stable as a team. We need to keep moving forward together. That's what we need to do as a party.
What do you think went wrong?
It's too early, Andrew, to make those decisions. As I said, we need to listen. We need to learn. A lot of things clearly went wrong. The Australian people have shown us that. But there is not one reason, there are a lot of reasons, but that comes about by listening, by learning, by changing. We need to change while staying true to our values as a Liberal Party.
My question, thank you. Given, obviously it's very close, I've spoken to Liberal MPs who say just ended up a different price coming onto the ticket at the last